Hello, my name is Anne Wang. I'm a teaching artist with the Houston Center for Photography. I've been teaching the Levy Park workshop since May 2017. Today is the start of a new series of photography workshops at Levy Park, and this series of workshops will run from May 2020 until April 2021. Usually, we meet every first and third Saturday of the month from 9 to 11 at Levy Park. Unfortunately, due to COVID-19, we have to move these workshops online. So today I'm going to present you camera basics through a slideshow, but I do hope that you will join me on May 2nd, Saturday, for a live Q&A on Zoom. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon at Levy Park. Welcome any type of camera, from the fanciest DSLR to cellular phones. And actually this year we had really a lot of fun with some of our participants that came with their iPhone. And we have also participants that come with their point and shoot. So really the important thing is not the camera but the eye. And also the camera doesn't do the photographer. It's not because you are buying a fancier camera that your pictures will get better. I've taken a Canon Rebel because I've noticed that a lot of my students come with this camera. So there are different things that I would like you to point to. However, the most important thing though is for you to download your manual and read your manual, because this presentation is here to guide you, but it won't replace the fact that it is essential that you read your manual, your camera manual. And if you do not have it, you can download it from the internet. So the most basic thing, of course, is the shutter release here. So when you take an image, please do not press your shutter release fully right away. Press it halfway, set the focus, have your composition well set, and push it fully. Then here we have the flash button. So if you shoot fully automatic, when there is not enough light, the flash will pop up of its own, will pop open. And that's why during these workshops, I'm taking you away from the auto mode and taking you to the semi-manual or fully manual mode, to where you'll be deciding yourself whether the flash pops open or not. And for this, you'll be using this button here. The other thing that's very important is the focus mode switch. This is to decide whether you are going to focus manually or going to use the autofocus in your camera. So the autofocus mode in the modern cameras is really very performant. As I'm losing some of my sight, I don't see as well anymore as when I was 20, I tend to rely on the autofocus mode. However, there are some situations of low light or macro photography, food photography, where you will have to use the manual mode. And that's where you'll be using this switch here. Then there's another important feature, which is the image stabilizer switch. So this is a very nice feature in the modern cameras also, where it's going to prevent unwanted blur caused by a small camera movement. For example, if you're not very stable when you handhold your camera, the image stabilizer is going to control that slight movement and eliminate unwanted blur. However, if you're shooting on a tripod, you really do want to switch this off. Why? Because the image stabilizer is going to find a movement that the tripod is preventing. So they are really going to play against each other. So you do not want your image stabilizer on when you use a tripod. Coming back to the focus mode switch, if you are going to focus manually, there are two rings on your lens. The first one, the closest to you, is the zoom ring if you have a zoom lens. That's what's going to allow you to zoom in and out. The ring that is further out is the focusing ring, the one with which you will focus your image. Let's move now to the back of the camera. So the most important button here is the menu button. It's going to allow you to access all the menus for your camera. There are different sets of menus. One is the shooting menu, where you can define the image quality, red eye reduction, metering mode, etc. The another set is the playback, and the last one is the setup, where you can, for example, set up things like the date, the time, the language. However, there are certain features that you can access not only from your menu button, but a lot quicker from the Q button here, quick control. Nowadays, this Q button, you can find it here with a big Q, which is more handy, okay? The other thing that is important here is the dioptric adjustment knob. So if you're wearing glasses like me and you look through the viewfinder of anyone else cameras, everything is going to be blurred. So what the dioptric does for you is that you can turn that little knob here either towards the plus and the minus until all the information that you can see in your viewfinder, like the symbology, like the grid, the exposure information, the focus point, is in focus. If everything is blurred, your image and the symbology, it means that you need to adjust your diopter. The other thing here is this navigation control, okay? So this ring here is going to help you navigate through your quick view and through your menu, okay? And we'll come back to the rest after, but very quickly, this is to select your focus point, this is to view your images, and this is to view any images you want to delete. From the top of your camera, there is two important dials that I want you to remember. It's the command dial that's going to be to help you select what you want in the menu, but also going to allow you to select your aperture or your shutter speed. That's something that we'll cover later. This is the mode dial, and I'm going to cover this in more detail in the following slides. So the dial mode. There is a basic zone, which is the zone that we do not really want to use because the camera is deciding everything for you. And if you are joining me at the Levy Park workshops, it's to learn how to use the semi-manual or fully manual mode so that you can, unleash your full creativity. However, if sometimes you're in situations where you feel challenged because you are still learning, you can use the portrait mode. What does that do? It blurs the background and creates a softer image. The landscape mode, where everything will be in focus from front to back. It's a very sharp image with vivid blues and greens. And this is the macro mode to shoot flowers or close up things. And this is the moving subject mode. However, to move to the creative zone, okay? And in the creative zone, I really want you to use TV, which is shutter priority, the shutter priority mode. As the user, you will set the shutter speed. When do you want to use this mode? You want to use this mode when you want to convey the sense of motion, or where you want to freeze an action, or when you are panning. There is a full workshop on panning and shutter speed later in the program. The other one is aperture priority. Aperture priority is where the user is going to set the aperture. This is when you want to have control of the depth of field, which means you want to blur the background to isolate your subject, or you want to make everything sharp from front to end, like when you do landscape photography. The last one is the manual exposure. I like to have my students start first with aperture priority and then use shutter priority when there is a need for it, and then we move on to manual. However, some of you are ready to start with manual, fully manual mode, and that's fine. We can do that together. So, the quick view, I was mentioning to you earlier on the quick view. That's the cue here. And the quick view is wonderful because you can access on one screen all the things that I really would like you to learn how to set so that your camera is set appropriately. So you'll choose your shooting mode, the shutter speed will display, the aperture. I want you to choose the ISO depending on the lighting situation. I do not want you to shoot on auto ISO unless really you are learning and you feel challenged and that's too many things to control, then yes. And the lighting change, the light conditions are changing a lot. Okay, that's fine. We can go to auto, but I'd rather have you set your ISO automatically. The ISO is how sensitive is your sensor to light. Then the picture style here, we'll go cover this later. Then the white balance, which is the quality of the light. This is the autofocus mode. How do we want to focus? Do we have a moving object or not? This is how I'm selecting my focusing point depending on the subject I have in front of me and my composition. This is the drive mode. Do I want to burst one picture or several pictures at the same time? And this is the metering mode. How am I going to expose my image? And this is the image quality. We always want to shoot at the highest quality we can, because if you paid a lot of money for a camera, show you how to set up your camera also from the menu. So the first thing I want you to do is set your image quality. Okay? So when you go to image quality, you'll have different things. You have a large, then a large that looks, like a step, medium, small. This is good to publish on the web. But the two that interest us really is the large and the raw, or raw plus large. If you're a beginner and you don't edit your photograph, I recommend that you shoot only large. If you understand what RAW is and you're used to process your images, then you can shoot RAW and large at the same time. You'll have two images that are created, or you can shoot only RAW. But for my beginners, please do not shoot medium or small format. Choose the maximum image quality that is available in your camera. The second thing is the drive mode. Okay, so do we want to shoot one picture when I push the shutter? Do I take one picture or do I take several pictures at the same time? Like tack, 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 tack. It will keep taking images. Well, we want to set on only one. Okay, you would take really successive images when you are doing action shooting. So by default, we leave it only a single shooting mode. Yes. And these are your timer. If you use a tripod and you want to take an image of your family, you put the timer on, okay? The other thing that I think is very important to set is the card reminder. You want to make sure that your camera is not letting you shoot without having a memory card in your camera, okay? And this is available in the first menu tab. And it's release shutter without card, and you're going to disable that. Okay, we do not want I've had students shooting and then realizing that they didn't have their images because they didn't have a memory card in their camera. The last thing is that if you notice here on top, if you look at my cursor where it's moving, okay, the cameras here at first, that's what we call the shooting settings, like the image quality, the ISO, things like that. The second one is the playback setting, and the last one is the setup setting, like a toolbox type of thing. This is where you'll set up the dates, time, etc. Okay, again, let's keep on the basic settings for your camera, things that won't change very often. Set the color space. Okay, so it's on the third tab of the menu, and you're going to set it to sRGB. sRGB really is the most common space. That's how internet functions. Adobe RGB has its advantages, but for now, as a beginner, or even I use sRGB because it makes the workflow so much easier. Okay, it's recognized. It's a common standard. There is a very nice feature which is about formatting card. You can find this in the first tab of the tool menu. So what that does when you select format card, it will erase all data and images on the card. Basically, it reformats your card so that it's clean for your new shooting session. Then on the second tab of the tool, of the setting tool, you can find how to set the date and time for your images. And I think that's very important so that you can catalog your images accurately. The next thing, it's in the shooting menu, the second tab, it's the white balance. Okay, so what is the white balance? The white balance basically is allowing you to identify what is the quality of light in which you are shooting, whether it's daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten, white, fluorescent, a flash, or a flash. So what does that do? It's going to be able to render the true colors and render white as true white. Okay, so here you have some example of different colors depending on the light that you have around. For example, if you take an image within your house, you might want to set your white balance to tungsten, otherwise it would be tinted. If you are in an office lighting, you might want to set up your white balance to white fluorescent light. In most of the people set it to daylight. For me, because I'm used to process my images in Lightroom, I can easily fix the white balance in Lightroom. So I choose to put my white balance in automatically, auto white balance. There are some people that like to have a warm feel to their image like this. And so they will set their white balance always on cloudy. For me, the images turn way too orange. So it's a matter of taste. That's something you will have to experiment with. So I really recommend that you go and shoot outside and change your white balance, then come back inside in artificial light, put the lights on, shoot again a few images and play with the white balance and see what happens. So now I want to talk about something, the picture style here. That's that button here. So I access, you click on quick view, select the picture style, and I'd like you to, I used to set my picture style to neutral, but I've discovered that actually faithful might be better because there is a better rendering of the natural colors. And again, this is like shooting automatic versus manual. If you set the picture style to standard, portrait, landscape, or monochrome, well, no, let's say the first three, standard, portrait, or landscape, you see that these numbers change here. So basically what the camera does, it's going to edit your images for you. So you really do want to have it either on neutral or faithful, where everything is set to 0. Then picture style, it's also where you are going to go if you want to shoot in black and white, and you'll set your picture style to monochrome. But for now, before you come to the workshop at Levy Park, set your picture style to faithful if you're shooting in color. Start. Set the color space. Okay, so it's on the third tab of the menu, and you're going to set it to sRGB. sRGB really is the most common space. That's how internet functions. Adobe RGB has its advantages, but for now, as a beginner, or even I use sRGB because it makes the workflow so much easier. Okay, it's recognized, it's a common standard. There is a very nice feature which is about formatting card. You can find this in the first tab of the tool menu. So what that does, when you select format card, it will erase all data and images on the card. Basically, it reformats your card so that it's clean for your new shooting session. Then on the second tab of the tool, of the setting tool, you can find how to set the date and time for your images. And I think that's very important so that you can catalog your images accurately. The next thing, it's in the shooting menu, the second tab, it's the white balance. Okay, so what is the white balance? The white balance basically is allowing you to identify what is the quality of light in which you are shooting, whether it's daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten, white, fluorescent, a flash, or a flash. So what does that do? It's going to be able to render the true colors and render white as true white. Okay, so here you have some example of different colors depending on the light that you have around. For example, if you take an image within your house, you might want to set your white balance to tungsten, otherwise it would be tinted. If you are in an office lighting, you might want to set up your white balance to white fluorescent light. Okay, so I'm going to cover aperture priority first. So you are going to use the mode dial on top of your camera and put it on the AV here. Okay, so when you are on the quick view screen, you will see AV as a shooting mode, and you are going to be able to control the aperture. So how do you control the aperture? You are going to use the command dial here. Move it to the right or to the left, and your aperture is going to increase or decrease. Aperture. Aperture is a hole within the lens. And what that does, it's going to control the amount of light that is reaching the sensor. And the sensor is really what captures your image. We've talked about that early in the presentation. And the aperture is expressed in what we call f-stops. And something that is not really, is a bit counterintuitive, is that the smaller the f-stop, f1.8, the bigger the hole, okay? Meaning the more light gets in and hit the sensor. The bigger the number, f22, the smaller the hole. here there is a very, very small quantity of light that reach the sensor. Okay, and this is what we call a stop, 1.8 to 2.8, then 2.8 to 4.0, then to 5.6, then to 8, to 11, 16, and 22. It's important to remember that. In each of these numbers, it's a full stop. So remember, aperture is the whole opening within my lens. What does that do? We want to be on aperture priority when we want to control the depth of field. So if you see at f2.8, my first pen here is sharp, but the last one is totally blur. And as I increase my aperture and decrease the size of the hole, a wider range of pencils are going to be in focus, okay? So let's say I'm taking a portrait, this is the face of the person, and I want to have everything in the background a nice blur. Then I will shoot at smaller aperture. However, when I shoot landscape, I want everything in focus from front to back. So I'm going to go to smaller aperture. Big aperture, small number for portraits. Small aperture, big number for landscapes. And I really encourage you to do that exercise either with different objects that are put in a row, or the pencils like in the previous slide, and then shoot and see what's going to be blur and what's going to be in focus, okay? So usually when you focus on something, the 1/3 behind and the 2/3, the 1/3 in front and the 2/3 behind the subject, that's what's going to be blur, okay? And as you use a smaller aperture, the depth of field is going to increase. Does that make sense? I think it's a very self-explanatory slide that shows that as you use a smaller aperture, your depth of field range is going to get bigger. And again, please do the activity that is in the previous slide. So there is some move up or down your shutter speed with the control dial here, if you look at my cursor. So on the quick view, TV would be displayed to be saying that you are in shutter speed priority mode. Your shutter speed will display here and your aperture. So the shutter speed stands for the length of time the shutter is open to admit light to come and reach the sensor. So the longer the shutter is open, the more light is going to hit the sensor. So the more overexposed, the chances for your camera to be overexposed. So I've got a scale here that says that when the shutter speed doesn't stay open a very long time, this is a fast shutter speed, okay, here, it's going to freeze the motion. So if I'm going to photograph horse jumping, golfing, soccer, you know, you might want to be in the faster shutter speed if you want to freeze the movement. Then if you go here 30, you are starting to really show movement. If you have a pedestrian walking, someone biking by, or a bird flying, you are going to see the movement in the wings, the blur of the bike, okay? And down here, these are extremely slow shutter speed when, for example, you have a waterfall and you want to have, you know, that foamy cotton look in the waterfall. This is photographed with a tripod as a very slow shutter speed. Talking about tripod, really 1/60 here, okay? If you are 1/60 and above, you can shoot and handheld, like holding your camera. If you are at 1/60 and under, you really need a tripod, otherwise you are not going to have a sharp image, you know. You are going to shake, and the camera is going to register not only the movement of the subject, but you moving the camera up and down because you are shaking, okay? So this example here, again, that's a hands-on activity you can do at home. You have different shutter speed. This is slow, 1 second, and as I'm going faster, it's freezing the movement, okay? So the shutter speed is going to allow you, like aperture, to be more or less creative, you know. How is it nice, you know, this windmill here? Is it nicer like this with a fast shutter speed, or does it start to be more pleasing to the eyes as a slower shutter speed and be more interesting? So that's what we call the creative exposure, where you'll have to make a conscious choice of your aperture and shutter speed to have a beautiful image. If you let the camera decide because you're shooting fully auto, you might get this image here, you know, not very interesting. Okay, so shutter speed is to freeze or show motions. It depends what is the most creative, most appealing solution for the image you are taking, or what you need to do if you do sport photography. You know, people might want a sharp picture even though you prefer the blurred one that show the motion. The other thing is that if you are shooting in low light without a tripod, you really need to have a tripod if you are going to use a slower shutter speed than 1/60 second. I know that I'm a little bit shaky with my hands, and also my subjects might always move a little bit. So to be sure to have sharp images and a sharp subject, I tend to shoot way faster than that. You know, 1/80, even up to 1/125, okay? And okay, the bigger the ISO, nowadays they go really high, I mean 2500, the more sensitive it is to light. However, so here there are some guide, you know, 100 when it's really sunny. When you come to Levy Park, you know, I don't want you to have your ISO on auto, so you'll go to 200. If it tends to be like a cloudy, dark day, you might want to move up to 400, but you know, we would stay in that range here, okay? When you move at a very high ISO is that you're going to lose quality in the image. You are going to have what we call noise. In the time of film camera, we called it grain, and grain could actually have some charm. It was quite nice. However, in the world of digital images, it's truly noise. And you see here, you get a bokeh of, you get some weird colors, you know, that start to appear. And the noise is more like pixels. It's a pixel, yeah, pixels that are starting to appear. So it's really not pleasing to the eye. So basically, you really want to always shoot at the lowest ISO that you can. Again, the camera doesn't make the photographer, because the most important thing is first what you're going to capture. But as you get good at that, the camera is going to start being important as well, because, for example, with my Canon 6D, I can shoot easily up to 3600, I think, without having noise showing up. With a Rebel camera, you cannot do that. You know, with a Rebel, maybe 800, 400, you'll start having noise, okay? So this is, so basically on top of your camera, there is a button labeled ISO, and that's going to take you to a screen like this, which is where you're going to be able to set up your ISO, okay? If you have a camera that does not perform well at high ISO, I highly recommend in the menu to set up the max ISO that you allow your camera to go to. So one exercise that is interesting to do is take several images in your camera at different ISO, but make sure it's properly exposed, okay? So you'll have to adjust either your shutter speed or your aperture so that it's not over or underexposed. But change your ISO and look at which point your images are starting to break down, okay? When do you start to see noise coming in? Okay,